We are live from Julia's, and I am caffeinated.
Mm-hmm.
Alan, our is holding up the cup of our great sponsor. They're not really our sponsor. We just like their coffee, so we want to mention it each time
It's really good this morning.
because it feels good when you drink it. Yes, Magnolia. Anyway, this is our magical moment.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So we've got a couple of treats in store for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about what we did over the last week, and we're also going to talk about our musical playlist for tomorrow, because we're going to be driving out to Fayetteville and Laurinburg. That's right. And both those events are posted on my Jeff Scott for Congress page. I think also on Coffee Pan Dulce, and probably on your page, right? So
I believe so. I'd have to check.
Yeah, you can take and share and make sure Green Party aficionados out in that area can come meet you, because this is an opportunity for people in the outer counties. I say outer counties, but that's because we're very Charlotte centric, and I'm sorry for that. But it's just the reality of the geography that we've got to drive 3 hours across the district to meet people and meet voters and meet our supporters. So we did that for Pride.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. So let's go back to the beginning of the week, because we had our show last Friday, but then on the weekend, because it was Labor Day weekend, we both went to Matthews Alive.
That's right.
So tell me about your experience at Matthews Alive.
So it was a great event. I thought the turnout this year seemed a lot higher than it had been in previous years, and the temperature seemed a lot higher than it had been in previous years as well. But we had a lot of fun. My family and I went out, and so we did. We took the opportunity to do a little bit of politicking, a little bit of just family fun, and it was a lot of fun for everybody. And I know, Jeff, you spent 2-3 days there. Is it?
I spent 2 days there. Yeah. The Saturday and Sunday. By the time Monday rolled around, I spent I spent a lot more time there than I thought I was, because I was having a good time. So Saturday I was there from 8:15 to 1:15. That was 5 hours. I'd ran out of the cards that I had stuffed in my pocket, so I didn't really have anything to give out to people, and I was tired anyway. That's a long time for standing, and the temperature was going up. So Sunday I came back at about the same time, 1:15, with all the rest of my cards, and I gave away all the rest of my cards. So Fayetteville and Laurinburg will have to suffer from the lack of swag in my pocket. Little pictures of me with my website and stuff. So one of the things that strikes me about these larger events, including Pride from back in mid-August, is the fact that we meet a lot of people who are new to the area.
Tons of them.
Yeah. We asked if they're a voter, and my approach is usually ask somebody whether they're a voter or not, and they say, I don't know. We just moved here, or we're just looking to buy here, or we don't know where we are. That's just indicates to you the attractiveness of this area, particular down in Matthews and in Union County. If you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that speaks a lot to what's happening here in terms of population growth. It's something like 35 people per day move to this area. Is that right?
Yeah, it's some crazy number. And it's obviously having an impact on real estate prices, on housing, and a lot of the issues that city council candidates are talking about in the various forums that they're attending at this time. So we'll be seeing more of that in the months to come after the special election, after the primary. But it doesn't seem nearly as competitive as it was 2 years ago.
No, it's definitely different, and that might be to what you were saying about the population growing,
Yeah.
I mean, that population shift could be contributing to something politically shifting as well, whether it's, people who are not necessarily in tune with Charlotte area politics, Mecklenburg County politics, because we have so many newcomers, people are not embedded in that.
That's right. Yeah.
That community.
So we do know that the character of the city is changing, and this discussion comes up a lot. People who have lived here for many years have a kind of a mix of frustration, with the old values and some of the nice old features of Charlotte, when really a lot of the new people are coming in and applying a lot of pressure for it to be new, modern, clean, well-run. Greenways, very nicely landscaped, and it's just got all the features of a nice, modern, rebuilt city, which is fine with me. I don't have the deep roots here, so I'm fine with modernizing and upgrading. So this just leads me to a question about. We both spoke to the Fayetteville Observer, so their ears have kind of pricked up about the race, partly because of Trump coming to the Fayetteville airport on next Monday to stump for our opponent Dan Bishop, and so they spent a good amount of time with both you and I on the phone. And one of the things that the reporter Paul Wolverton. What I remember, and we did these separately, so I have no idea what he asked you. I assume he asked you the same, probably the same
similar
things.
questions. Yeah.
But at least a couple of the questions were pretty much Fayetteville centric.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that Fort Bragg is is it the biggest military base in the country? If it's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest, right? So by population and by
possibly, I think Fort Hood is pretty big in Texas.
Okay. So we'll have to get our facts straight on that. Otherwise, we'll be embarrassed in public once again. Anyway, the questions that he asked were about, and this is a news story I'd missed because we were so busy. I was very busy on Wednesday, and we did other interviews. We'll talk about that a little later. But the point is that we missed a news story about money being allocated from the Defense Department, defense spending, military spending, to the wall. Right. And so that means that certain military projects that benefited both Lejeune and Bragg were cut off. And so the question put to me was, what are you going to do about the $40 million that Fort Bragg just lost because they need schools? So I guess it was for, I don't know exactly what the purpose of, whether it was for a specific new school because they needed the school or what, but the way that I approach this, and Alan, of course, is run for school board. He's got kids entering school. I've got two kids that are out of school, and so as parents, we've got some somewhat focused opinions on this topic. I'll give you the short version of my answer first, and then I'll let you pipe in. The main point is that if you are building schools, or if you are whatever the purpose of the money is, the leadership at Fort Bragg simply has to make their case, right? So you can't, as a congressional candidate, I can't promise, yes, I'm going to go get you a big lump of sum of money from the federal government to do with it what you want. It does have to be earmarked, essentially. It has to be geared to this specific project. So then the issue is, can you make the case for it? And so what I said to Mr. Wolverton was, look, obviously schools are important. The question is, do they have deferred maintenance? Is the paint peeling? Are they not able to attract good teachers because expenses are high in the neighborhood, or it looks dumpy, or the kids can't play inside during the summer because the gym floor needs to be refinished? I mean, we're aware of all of those problems because we've been through that before. Again, so I would just to wrap this particular point up, I would just say, the case has to be made and it has to be solid, because you can't just ask somebody for a lump sum of money based on the fact that someone said they need something.
That's right.
So go ahead.
And he phrased it slightly differently to me. So I didn't actually go into all that detail, but I want to call out, I think this is a fantastic example of the value that third-party candidates can bring to political discussions, because this is something that has the potential to be very calcified within those left versus right talking points. Right. And I think about the response that Jeff gave with kind of dissecting this issue and saying, let's look at how schools are funded, how decisions are made through that chain of command. Like, that's something you would not hear in these very polarizing environments. So I appreciate that. And to that I say, when I had to answer the question, I defaulted over to that. And it could be the way that the question was framed.
Well, what do you mean how did you default?
So my response to the question, I think the way he phrased it to me was more or less, how do you feel about this thing that happened? And so my gut response to this is that anything related to building this wall it's an expensive blunder, is what I call it. And that's what I believe.
Right.
So I didn't go into detail about how we earmark projects and things like that, but I think that's value that can be added to that conversation.
So, so he asked me the same question in the same way, but I interpreted it slightly different. I thought he wanted us to comment on the wall itself.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so I first, for the first minute or so, I talked about the wall, and I made a point that I've repeated here before, which is, I grew up near the border, and I know that area, so around, Tecate, is fairly mountainous, and a literal wall doesn't make a lot of sense. But of course, we are for security. We're for border security. We're for security where it's appropriate. It just sort of depends on how you define what our security needs are, and if they're exaggerated and ridiculous and they're fueled by insane fears and cronyism, then that's not really security. That's just spending taxpayer dollars because it's there, right? So but eventually I got back to this issue of school funding. So this is a big issue, right? So did he also ask you about the he mentioned, I think, was the mayor of Hope Springs or the council of Hope Springs, and about the storm drainage?
Yeah, I was going to say we could talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is something, because I know Jeff mentioned this. He talked about earmarking federal dollars, and you can't just go in and just say, hey, we want this chunk of money for you.
Right.
One thing he asked about was he pointed out, Robert Pittenger, who's the former representative of this area, he had a Fayetteville office out there. It was staffed by someone who was not necessarily, according to people out in Fayetteville, not in tune with the community very well, not connected to the community. And so they didn't really understand a lot of the issues. So his question was, how can we make sure that money is being allocated for the projects, the infrastructure projects that are needed locally and at the state level? And one of the responses I had to that was that what we could do, in addition to opening an office there, because I think that is important, because the district is so wide.
We were asked that question at the Fayetteville.
Would be to set up some sort of, whether it's a committee or a panel or something community-based or something, staffed, but to have some sort of intergovernmental relations process or committee to facilitate that communication, to make sure that needs are communicated from municipalities on up to the federal level, and to make sure that opportunities are communicated. I'm doing my hand signals here on the table. Are communicated back down, federal, state, down to local, to make sure that those channels are all talking together. Because I think that's, when you have that breakdown in the communication, that's where you don't get funding for projects. That's where needs go unmet, I think.
Okay. So Alan's doing a lot of talking with his hands off camera here, but you'll have to watch it in the recap. We'll have to have a second or third camera show our hand movements. So again, I guess I was, I just given the answer about schools and deferred maintenance, and again, I went back to this idea that, if there is, and I'm talking with my aunts, if there are these things in place, we've got perhaps extreme weather events, and there's for whatever reason, it becomes more unpredictable. The population is denser. There's more concrete. The drainage hasn't been done very well. It's always been passable, but it needs to be beefed up. So there's been deferred maintenance on older systems. Again, that's a thing where you say we need to make the case, but that's not a community just saying, we're absolutely starved of capital and we need this from taxpayers in Washington. That's something that local and regional taxpayers, I believe, they have to have skin in the game, and that's why otherwise you're not going to get their best case. And I'm just trying to simplify this, right? Because it's really just storm drainage, right? And it's not a science, it's about anticipating what could happen in the future, and it's trying to watch your back to make sure that there's not a lot of destruction in the event of extreme events. So it stands to reason that the people who live there have to make a lot of these decisions and go out on a limb and at least start the funding, get that stuff rolling, and to a certain extent bankroll it. They've got to commit some of their own. Now I know there are complex federal programs where you can get matching and you can get emergency funding and things like that, but we do know, I think you would agree with this, that the more local it is, right, the more people at the local level that have skin in the game, that have stakes in the outcome, the better decisions you're going to get in the long run, because central planning organizations or people who are giving out money to their friends isn't a very good system.
Oh, it's not. And I think what you can even do in that situation, because I totally agree with you, the closer you get to the issue that needs to be remedied, to the people who have a real stake in that, the better the outcome is going to be, I think.
Yeah.
And it would be great if we could see the federal government, if we are going to do things like, and again, I've got my hands over here off screen, sorry. Yeah. If we are going to do things like federal grants, if we're going to, earmark funds for people, we should look into things like participatory grant making, which is a process where the people who are actively involved in an issue are part of the people who are defining what those grants are for. So it's not just the government coming in and saying, well, you have to do this and this and this, and then we'll give you the money. Right. You actually ask the people in the community to do that. That's one way to do it. And it's a fairly new system, but I think that it's it's a way of doing things that keeps the community engaged, because I agree, they do need to have skin in the game. They do need to have a seat at the table.
Right. So anyway, we appreciate the Fayetteville Observer, who is a slightly more independent than the Observer in Raleigh and the Observer in Charlotte. So we appreciate the fact that they've reached out and they're going to be publishing something, I believe, in the Sunday edition.
I think so, yeah.
And we provided pictures for them, and we're hoping that Mr. Wolverton comes to see us tomorrow midday when we're in Fayetteville, so he can get a picture of Alan and I, fighting on the floor over our music playlist.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I know that so Paul Wolverton asked me this, and I know that they asked. Dan Bishop and Dan McCready were both on WFAE recently. They did a radio interview.
Public radio.
And they asked them this question too, and it's interesting. It was almost verbatim the same question, but I think it's on a lot of people's minds because there are 4 candidates in this race.
Yeah,
we're facing a situation where whoever wins, if it's not me or Jeff, would be winning with less than 50% of the vote, and that some people might construe that as freedom to not necessarily represent a majority of voters. And I think that's really interesting to think about, because I don't see myself as a spoiler. I know Jeff doesn't see himself as a spoiler either.
Well, come on,
not
Alan.
in the traditional.
Speak for yourself.
Sure. But I think it's interesting to think about it It's you know.
Yeah, I did get that question from him, and I actually answered in the affirmative. I said, yeah, I hope I'm spoiling somebody's night, because when you think of all the people, it's a low turnout election.
Mhm.
They're not, to have less than a majority in a low turnout election, it still wins. You still get the prize.
Mhm.
But to deny them a complete majority is absolutely fine with me, because I'm party building, and I'm
Mhm.
personally brand building, right? I'm
Yeah.
trying to say you've got some options, and the idea that there would be so much amazing fear, so much money coming in, and the president and the vice president and the kind of hate messages that
Mhm.
we get on our phones through social media just shows that we're making a lot of people angry. So I
Yeah.
take that as a sign of success. That when you think about whatever, let's say the winner gets 40%. That means 40% of the people who voted, and a very small percentage of people who are registered to vote, and an even smaller percentage of people who are eligible to vote.
Right.
So that means someone could win with 10, 15, 20% of the
Yeah.
adult voting population supporting them. I think that's a good thing. I mean, one of the points that Chris made earlier in the week is, a lot of libertarians don't come to these events, because they're working. And I ran into, at Matthews Alive, I'm running
Mhm.
into, there's a guy, and he's with his wife, and he's holding his baby, and they got one in the crib, and he said, "Oh yeah, I was a libertarian in college in Florida, and I worked for blah 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 campaigns and stuff, and right now I'm working, I'm raising my kids,
Yeah.
what you're doing." It's like, I totally understand. I was in the same spot, 20 years ago. I got a family to raise, I got a job I got to go to, and appreciate what you're doing, but I can't participate.
Right.
So now, tables have turned. I've got the time, got the inclination, got the caffeine from Julius,
Mhm.
got the wind on my sails with the help of Alan and with the help of some of my other volunteers. So we're doing absolutely the right thing.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is they're not. I guess the unfortunate thing is that the major party candidates, at least on camera, at least in public, are not feeling the heat. They're not saying anything nasty in front of people about us. They're not saying, "Oh," unlike Pat McCrory. Pat McCrory just came out flat out and said that libertarians stole, X thousand of my
Mhm.
vote. Otherwise, I would have won. He literally said that on camera,
Yeah.
and we've got it posted on our Libertarian Party of Mecklenburg County page, where he just out and out says that. So the message, the candidates don't want to say that because they know in their hearts that it's really basically anti-democratic.
Oh yeah.
But essentially, the 25 million that's going to be spent on this, which is being spent now, which is basically crowding out the awareness of us, is the game for them. And so,
That's true.
do you want to talk about this weird thing that happened, this mass delusion that's going on? Because I think it might be important for people to hear. And I'll start it and then let you take.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
So at Matthews Alive, I handed a voter a card, and I said, "Did you vote?" And they said, "Already voted." And I said, "Oh, sorry to hear that. Um, I'm on the ballot. Wish you had considered me." I can't remember exactly what I said, but they turned and looked at me and said, "There were only 2 candidates on the ballot." I said, "No, there's 4 candidates on the ballot." And they looked at me again, fairly emphatically said, "No, there's only 2 candidates on the ballot." And I tried to track them, So that was unusual. And I think I sent a text to Alan saying, "I got a weird statement from somebody, but it can't possibly be true. So forget about it." So your turn.
And so,
Excuse me.
I took that just as, at face value. I was like, because there is a certain level of, we'll call it confirmation bias, or, people see so many ads that are just positioning these two candidates.
Mhm.
Maybe people overlook things. It's weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then independently of what Jeff found out, I've had reports from people who are working the polls, volunteering for our campaign, who've heard the same thing. They came out of the voting location and they said, there are only 2 names on my ballot. And of course, we have no proof because you can't legally take a picture of a ballot in North Carolina. That's against the law. And we're not going to go breaking the law.
Well, some of us in the present company aren't going to go breaking the law. I can't say who. Go on.
But it's very uncanny that Jeff heard these things independently and I've heard things independently. And it's really interesting because Jeff and I are in the middle of the ballot. So
yeah.
There are all sorts of scenarios how this could play out.
That's right. We are in the middle of the ballot.
We are in the middle of the ballot, which maybe means that me and I guess Dan Bishop are not on the ballot, which I'm sure there are a lot of people who wish that was the case.
Yeah. So we were talking about this on I can't remember what day it was. It must have been Tuesday.
Yeah.
And you made a call, right?
I made a call. So I called the County Board of Elections, and they told me what I had sort of believed. They said it's not possible. This is physically not possible because of the way that the ballots work.
Right.
I don't know. They notated my call.
Yeah.
I went and I'm doing independent research on these iVotronic machines to see how they work, because there's there are plenty of opportunities for something to go wrong. If there's if they're using the wrong PEBs and things like that, you could have the wrong ballot in there. Maybe one of them didn't get changed over. I heard somebody say that Mark Harris was on her ballot. So
okay. So you made the call. Was it Tuesday night?
Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah. It must have been Wednesday, because I decided I was fed up with these strange rumors. So I ended up going to the Mint Hill Public Library, and I stood and I talked to a Bishop volunteer, and I talked to one of your volunteers who was there, Rachel, who might even be listening right now. Hi, Rachel. And we talked about it, and she had sort of independently verified, I shouldn't say the word verify. She independently heard, and she was thinking that these people are not people who are going to punk me. They're not going to try to fool me. They're not going to try to gaslight me. They're telling me what they saw. And so I didn't have any campaign swag on me or anything like that. And I was just, dressed day to day, and I just walked into the library and I just hung out looking at books, waiting for voters to come out. And I swear, the first voter I talked to, African-American woman, I just kind of followed her. I didn't want to stalk her or anything, but I said, "Hey, did you just vote?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Could you tell me how many people are on the ballot?" And she said, 2. And I said, 2? Well, what election were you running in? I mean, what election were you voting for? And she said, "Oh, the Congress. And I said, "So you saw 2 candidates on the ballot?" She said, "Well, yeah, I think." And that's when she kind of stared up and, "Well, let me think about it." And she couldn't remember. And then finally, I was prompting her, and I finally got her to say, yeah, there must have been 4. And so I said, "Well, this is crazy." So I stood by the door and I watched people as they were walking out, just holding the door saying, "Hi, did you vote?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, we voted." And I said, "How many candidates are on the ballot?" And a couple of people just said 4. And a couple of people said 2. I mean 4. So people are literally walking in and being aware that they've only heard big advertising and voter guides from 2 candidates. They literally only see 2 names on the ballot. Now, there's some weird, we need a neuroscientist or a cognitive scientist to really understand this, and we won't belabor the point, but there's something very weird going on when, and this might be just the effect of massive advertising, the effect of all these mailers coming in, the fact that we can't, that Alan and I are really, we're struggling for air just to get noticed. And obviously the major media isn't covering us. So it's just some weird mental thing that's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you characterize it?
I'd say if it's not that, then what could possibly be is some sort of operational breakdown that has resulted in some of the voting kiosks having possibly the wrong ballots loaded into them, because we have, I think, 12 or 13 different ballot styles in Mecklenburg County.
Okay.
So it's easy for, there to be a mistake where,
Yeah.
the wrong ballot gets loaded in. I'm not saying somebody made that mistake, but I'm saying that is a possibility.
Yeah.
Not that it's necessarily malicious. It could just be oversight.
And that just strikes me as kind of a remote possibility. I mean, we know that electronics break down. We know that people cheat. Obviously, when we're in this election because people were, basically cheating with absentee ballots and this get out the vote stuff and this witnessing and stuff. A lot of people who, voted as absentees probably don't even know who they voted for. They can't tell you. Not only can they not tell you who's on the ballot, they can't tell you who they voted for,
right?
Because their ballots were, swooped up in these with these big packages. So the Democratic ideal. When I say the Democratic ideal, I'm saying the Republicans and Democrats of informing voters about the issues and about how we make democracy better is, in my estimation, completely hypocritical. They are being completely hypocritical, and they are just lying about it. Because they're not interested in informing. They're interested in getting out their own supporters. So I really, let me sort of wrap this point up. So their piety about democracy and informing voters and stuff like that and getting out the vote, that's also party candidate centric. They don't care about the overall situation. They care about getting their voters out. And I'm talking with my hands here. They care about their voters getting out and appealing to their supporters to generate enthusiasm and forget everybody else. Right. So anyway, do you have anything before we move on from our?
No, I mean, that's exactly it, and it's, it's really fun if you go up to one of these people and tell them that you voted straight ticket third party, just to see
watch them get flush. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had another interview earlier this week with Holly Morgan from the Inquirer Journal, and she wrote a nice piece that appeared on their paper. And she's one of the few journalists who have noticed, besides Rowan from last week, who've noticed that we're actually cooperating and doing what we can to pool resources to make sure that we are noticed and basically that we're working together. And so, we sent that article out, and I'm hoping that Roman does produce something in the next 24 hours through Creative Loafing or whatever channel he finds to talk about the interesting issue of whether this experiment that we've embarked on, and I guess because we've spent, what time is it? We've spent, so we've gone past 30 minutes, but let's go ahead and talk about whether we think this experiment can work in the future for other paired races. Whether it's scalable, whether people can, have the disposition to get along. Because we know there's some deep frictions, and we know there's some, very very prickly libertarians, and there's some very prickly Greens, right? And they might not be able to do this. So your thoughts on that? And let's try to, we'll keep it. Five minutes.
I think it's possible, and I think of this because I thought about this too. Because after we met with Holly Morgan, like what we've done here, I think can serve as a model for coalition building. Was it during that interview I was talking about the chess game, and then you have the four-way chess, and it's like that's a totally different ball game. And I think that Democrats and Republicans don't know how to operate in that environment, and I think that by us mixing ourselves into this and forming a coalition, we can sort of show people how it can be done, how you can have disagreements but still be civil about it, and also still cooperate on things to make progress where you do have common ground.
That's right. I guess the way they get around it is by again being pious about democracy, but not really informing their voters, just really instructing their voters. And obviously money helps, big money helps, and big money is really helping them, and anybody who's in the 9th district who is obviously being inundated with junk mail. Sometimes you're getting, I mean, it's one thing to get one every day. It's another thing to get 2 or 3 at a time,
Yeah.
which is pretty crazy. And all these dark money groups are pitching in because they believe it's a bellwether for 2020. When the census kicks in and a lot of lines are redrawn, and the power struggle is very real. So we encourage, if you're a candidate, or if you're thinking about a candidate, I guess we can't really talk about how to coordinate these things because the parties aren't working together at that level where they're knowledgeable about the other candidates. But if you're sort of paying attention to who's signing up in races for the North Carolina General Assembly or the Congress in the next season, or at least locally in the commissioner races for 2020,
Yeah.
you can certainly reach out to both our parties. Again, I'm chair of the local Libertarian Party, but we've also got a very active state party that's actively recruiting. So we're looking for opportunities like this where candidates can not pool financial resources, but pool the resources of getting in front of the camera, operating a webcast, participating in interviews, making sure that media is aware, making sure that one another are not missing opportunities to speak to the press or to be in front of groups, to talk to voters, basically to work together like we've been working together. So I think that's scalable in the sense that I think we're not so unique that other people can't do this. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's totally doable.
Yeah.
And I think because you can split it into two different things, right?
Yeah.
You have your issues and your
Right.
platform and things
Right.
you believe in, things you
Right.
fight for, and then you have
Yeah.
the way that you conduct yourself
That's
as
right.
a candidate, as a party. And those two things don't have to go hand in hand, right? You don't have to, it's not that Republicans are nasty and Democrats are the good guys
Yeah.
and things like that. It's all about
Mm.
how you conduct yourself as a candidate. And I think that that's something that we've shown is that,
Mm.
you can do politics and not be nasty about it.
That's right. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to approach it being a incendiary, bomb throwing. I've never done anything in my life but live in my parents' basement, and now I'm going to run for office.
Yeah.
I mean, Alan and I both have professional backgrounds. I'm closing in on retirement, but as long as you have a good temperament and you keep your professionalism, you realize not everybody is a bad guy. Despite what I've said about Dan Bishop and Dan McCready, I don't think they're, and in particular the way their staffs have treated me. I want to give credit to the people who do support Dan Bishop because they've tended to be more courteous than the people who on the Democratic side on McCready's staff who've not treated me with courtesy. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we sail off into the sunset? Remember, we're still coming up with our playlist for tomorrow. So I'm going to do a couple of live streams on our drive out to Fayetteville to complain about the music that Alan is selecting for the ride.
I have nothing at all of value to add other than to say that today is the last day of early voting.
Oh, yeah.
And if you haven't voted already, you should go vote. You should vote early in case anything happens.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen on election day. So if you haven't voted already, go vote. Take a look at our websites. You got jeffscottforcongress.com, alanforcongress.com. We would both love to earn your vote.
And if you're in the East Counties, Fayetteville, Laurinburg, this Saturday, one is outdoors and one is indoors. So looking forward to that. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope we'll at least do a 10-15 minute recap show after the election's over, assuming I'm not too hungover from my victory party.
Wait, you mean? But I'm going to be packing my things
Well, you
to
promi-
open my Washington office.
You
right?
promised to bartend at my inaugural party. Come on, man. We worked this out.
Oh,
Don't start fighting with me now.
but that's how
Okay.
we do it, right?
That's okay. whatever you say, Alan. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for listening.
Bartending.